Once again, we return to the world of Pokémon. Pokémon X and Y marked a major leap for the series, bringing the world of Pokémon into full 3D for the very first time with the stunning Kalos region. But behind the polished release, Game Freak left behind a surprising amount of cut features, scrapped mechanics, and unused Pokémon concepts. From mysterious train stations to incomplete mega evolutions, the development of X and Y had far more planned than what players ever got to see. Tonight, we'll quietly uncover the lost ideas and hidden secrets that never made it into the final game, exploring what could have been in Pokemon's sixth generation. When Pokemon X and Y were released in the year 2013, they represented a monumental shift in the franchise's visual style and design philosophy. For the first time in mainline Pokemon history, the games moved away from the traditional two-dimensional sprite-based visuals and embraced a fully three-dimensional world. This leap opened up countless new creative opportunities, but it also brought major challenges for Game Freak's developers. Building entire cities, towns, and routes in full 3 dimensions required more resources, more time, and more technical expertise than ever before. While the final game delivered an ambitious and vibrant Kalos region, it also left behind many hints of content that was started but never finished. One of the most famous examples of this is the unused train station in Lumiose City. Lumiose City, the beating heart of Kalos, was unlike any central city Pokemon had attempted before. Inspired heavily by Paris, it featured a circular layout with multiple avenues branching out from the iconic Prism Tower at its center. Every avenue led to new shops, cafes, and districts, giving players a sense of urban life unmatched by earlier games. Yet among the city's many attractions was a location that players could see but never truly experience: a small, elegant train station tucked away in the northern sector. Its clean white facade, large double doors, and overhead signage suggested it was a functional part of the city, a place you could visit, just like the Pokémart or the hotel. But from the day the game launched, the station's doors were permanently locked. Naturally, this sparked immediate curiosity among players. The Pokemon community is known for inspecting every inch of a game's world for secrets, and this train station became an instant mystery. Why was it here? Was it purely decorative, or had Game Freak originally planned for it to serve a purpose? Data miners, digging through the game's files, discovered that this wasn't just a hollow backdrop. The station had interior data remnants of a boarding platform, unused textures that hinted at ticket counters, and even audio files suggesting ambient train sounds. These findings strongly implied that the location was intended to be explorable at some stage during development. Fan theories exploded across online forums. One popular idea was that the train station might have been a planned link between Lumiose City and other regions, perhaps functioning as a post-game travel hub similar to the Battle Frontier or the Anne from earlier titles. Others speculated that it could have served as the entrance to a Kalos-based battle subway, inspired by the one in Unova. Some believed it might have been connected to an entirely different city or region that was cut from the game's final version. This was fueled by unused dialogue strings in the game's files referencing long-distance travel and connecting services, phrases that never appear in the released game. What made this mystery even more compelling was the existence of other inaccessible areas scattered throughout Kalos. Certain buildings in Lumiose had locked doors and no visible interiors, while others appeared fully modeled on the outside but led nowhere. The unused train station felt like the most prominent of these lost locations, a visible reminder of the content that did not survive the transition to the game's final build. Considering Pokémon X and Y were developed under the pressure of being the franchise's first fully three-dimensional mainline games, it is likely that some features were cut simply to meet deadlines and maintain performance on the Nintendo 3DS hardware. Over the years, the train station has taken on a kind of legendary status among fans of the series. It has been featured in countless YouTube theories, fan art imagining its interior, and even fan-made game modifications that attempt to restore or recreate what it might have looked like inside. While Game Freak has never publicly explained its purpose, its lingering presence in Lumiose City continues to fascinate players. The locked station doors stand as a quiet, unchanging monument to the mysteries of Pokémon X and Y's development, a reminder that even in a brightly lit, bustling city, there can still be places forever out of reach. One of the most exciting parts of any new Pokémon game is discovering the creatures that inhabit its world. From the moment Pokémon X and Y were announced, speculation ran wild about what new species would be introduced in the Kalos region. And in the end, the 6th generation brought us 72 brand new Pokémon, from the adorable Fennekin to the majestic Xerneas. But as is often the case in game development, not every creature designed for the game made it into the final version. Buried deep in the data for Pokémon X and Y are traces of unused Pokémon designs, alternate forms, and even evolutionary stages that never saw the light of day. Data miners quickly discovered that the internal Pokémon index in X and Y, known to fans as the National Dex Order in the game's code, contained unused slots. In theory, these could have been placeholders, but in some cases, the evidence suggests that actual Pokémon were planned and later cut. For example, certain index slots contain unused Cry audio files, short sound clips that every Pokémon makes, which do not match any Pokémon currently in the game. While these cries are short and often abstract, some fans noted that a few of them had tonal similarities to cries from earlier generations, hinting at possible scrapped evolutions or pre-evolutions for existing species. One of the most intriguing discoveries was the presence of unused Mega Evolution placeholders. Mega Evolution was the headline feature of Pokémon X and Y, allowing certain Pokémon to temporarily transform into more powerful versions of themselves during battle. In the game's code, there are entries for Mega Evolutions of species that never received them in the final release. These include well-known fan favorites like Flygon, Melodic, and even the Johto starter Pokémon. Flygon's absence, in particular, sparked endless speculation. According to later interviews with Game Freak staff, a Mega Flygon was indeed planned, but the developers struggled to finalize its design. They reportedly wanted it to have a dramatic, visually distinct appearance, but every concept either looked too similar to its regular form or failed to meet their expectations. In the end, they scrapped the idea rather than release a Mega Evolution they were not satisfied with. There is also evidence of unused alternate forms for Pokémon that did make it into the final game. For example, certain Pokémon that appear in both X and Y and the subsequent Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire have additional form data in X and Y's files that is never used in gameplay. Some fans believe these were early test versions of new forms that Game Freak later saved for future releases. This theory is supported by the fact that some of these hidden form slots were eventually used in later games, while others remain empty to this day. Adding to the mystery, unused Pokédex entries were also found in the game's data. These entries are blank in the released game, but appear in the same formatting as the regular Pokédex descriptions, suggesting that Game Freak originally planned for additional Pokémon but cut them before writing the flavor text. It is possible these blank entries correspond to the unused cries and index slots, but without official confirmation, the connection remains speculative. Players have also speculated that some scrapped Pokémon may have been tied to unreleased events. Pokémon X and Y were known to have several planned event distributions that never occurred, at least outside of Japan. It is not unusual for event-exclusive Pokémon to be hidden in a game's data long before the event itself, and if those events were cancelled, the associated Pokémon might have been left unused. Considering that Pokémon Z, a rumored third version of X and Y, was never released, it is entirely possible that some of these Pokémon and forms were being held for that game before it was quietly cancelled in favor of Pokémon Sun and Moon. The discovery of these unused Pokémon sparked an entire subculture within the fandom dedicated to cataloging and theorizing about what these creatures might have looked like. Fan artists have created thousands of designs imagining what Mega Flygon, Mega Milotic, or a Mega version of the Johto starters could have been. These interpretations range from highly plausible to wildly creative, with some incorporating hints from unused animations or early promotional materials. In this way, the scrapped Pokémon of X and Y have taken on a life of their own, living on not in the official games, but in the imaginations of fans. It is fascinating to think about how different the Kalos region might have felt if these Pokémon had been included. New Mega Evolutions could have shifted the competitive battling scene dramatically. Unreleased forms might have expanded the lore of certain species. An entirely new Pokémon could have added even more diversity to the region's wildlife. Instead, these creatures remain hidden away in the game's code, ghostly reminders of what might have been. Like the locked train station in Lumiose City, these unused Pokémon stand as a testament to the realities of game development. Not every idea can be completed in time for release, and sometimes the most intriguing content is the content we never actually get to play. The presence of these unfinished or unreleased Pokémon in X and Y invites endless speculation and keeps the mystery of the Kalos region alive, even years after the games first arrived on the Nintendo 3DS. When Pokémon X and Y launched in the year 2013, many players quickly noticed something unusual about one of the game's legendary Pokémon Zygarde. Introduced as part of the legendary trio alongside Xerneas and Yveltal, Zygarde was the guardian of order, said to watch over the ecosystem and intervene when the balance between life and destruction was threatened. But unlike the other two members of the trio, Zygarde felt incomplete. It had no major role in the game's main storyline, no special cutscene for its discovery, and no signature location tied to the plot. Instead, it could simply be found deep within Terminus Cave, waiting quietly to be caught. Players were puzzled. Why introduce a third legendary in the box art trio, only to leave it largely ignored in the story? This mystery deepened when data miners uncovered unused assets and references to Zygarde-related content that never appeared in the final release. These findings hinted that Game Freak may have originally intended for Zygarde to have a much larger role in Pokémon X and Y, possibly one that would be explored in a follow-up game. First, there were unused move slots in the game's data, labeled in ways that suggested they were designed for Zygarde. While the final release included its signature move, Land's Wrath, these extra entries hinted at other unique attacks that were either never programmed in or removed late in development. Additionally, the internal coding for Zygarde's base stats and forms appeared unusual, with gaps and placeholders that suggested the developers might have been experimenting with multiple forms of the Pokémon. This theory gained credibility years later when Pokémon Sun and Moon introduced Zygarde's additional forms, the 10% form, the 50% form, the one seen in X and Y, and the massive complete form. These forms required collecting Zygarde cells scattered throughout the region, a mechanic entirely absent from X and Y, but perhaps originally planned for Kalos. Further evidence came from unused text strings in X and Y's files that referenced a monitoring system and scattered components, phrases that fit perfectly with the Zygarde cell mechanic introduced in Sun and Moon. Many fans believe this mechanic may have been conceived during X and Y's development, but ultimately delayed to a later game due to time constraints. If this is true, it would mean that much of Zygarde's lore was cut from its debut appearance and only fully realized years later in an entirely different region. Adding to the intrigue, there were also references to a location that does not exist in the final game, possibly meant to be a unique setting tied to Zygarde. While Terminus Cave serves as its catch location in the released version, the unused location data contained identifiers that suggest a more elaborate environment, perhaps a shrine, laboratory, or underground chamber designed specifically for Zygarde's story. Some fans even believe that this missing area could have been part of a post-game quest, much like the Delta episode in Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. One of the most compelling theories is that Pokémon X and Y were meant to be followed by a third version widely assumed to be called Pokémon Z, which would focus heavily on Zygarde and complete its story arc. This theory was fueled by the anime, which introduced new Zygarde forms and a major Zygarde-centric storyline long before those elements appeared in the games. It seemed logical that these concepts were being prepared for the next Kalos-based game. However, Pokémon Z never materialized, with Game Freak instead moving directly to Pokémon Sun and Moon. The reasons for this shift remain unknown, but it may have been tied to development priorities, hardware timelines, or the desire to move the main series to a new region more quickly. The absence of a dedicated Zygarde storyline in X and Y left many fans feeling that the Kalos region's legendary lore was unfinished. Xerneas and Yveltal received major moments in the plot, representing life and destruction respectively, yet Zygarde's role as the Guardian of Order was left entirely to the player's imagination. The unused content found in the game's data only deepens this sense of incompleteness, hinting at a far more ambitious plan for the Pokémon that never came to be. In later years, some of Zygarde's mysteries were answered through interviews with Game Freak developers. They confirmed that certain Pokémon are sometimes introduced earlier than their full concept is ready, with the intent to expand on them in future games. While they did not explicitly say this was the case for Zygarde, it aligns perfectly with the evidence. The unused move slots, the strange coding for multiple forms, the cut location data, and the delayed introduction of the cell-collecting mechanic all point to a creature that was meant to have a grander role than what we saw in 2013. Today, Zygarde stands as one of the clearest examples of how Pokémon X and Y's cut content still casts a shadow over the games. It is a reminder that the Pokémon we meet in a given game are not always the complete vision their creators had in mind. Sometimes, the full picture is scattered across multiple titles, requiring years of patience and a little data mining to piece together. For many players, the Zygarde mystery remains one of the most tantalizing what-if scenarios of the Kalos era, a story that began in the depths of Terminus Cave and still feels like it was only half told. One of the most common hopes among Pokemon fans is that after the credits roll, the game's world will open up with new places to explore and new challenges to face. In many past generations, post-game content added entirely new regions, battle facilities, or hidden dungeons that rewarded players for sticking around after defeating the champion. Pokémon X and Y, however, were often criticized for having a surprisingly light post-game compared to previous titles. Outside of the Battle Maison, the Friend Safari, and a handful of side quests, there was little in the way of new areas to discover. But as data miners and dedicated players later uncovered, it seems that Game Freak originally had plans for additional post-game locations in Kalos areas that were either never completed or cut before release. The first clue comes from unused map data hidden within the game's files. Every explorable area in Pokémon X and Y is stored in the code with a specific identifier. Among these identifiers are several entries that do not correspond to any known in-game location. These mysterious entries include references to Zone 21, Zone 22, and Zone 23, names that follow the same internal naming style as Kalos's official routes and towns. This numbering suggests they were intended to be connected to the existing world map, possibly as new routes or special zones players could access only after completing the main story. Some of these unused zones even have partial terrain data attached to them, simple layouts with placeholder textures, suggesting that basic design work had already begun. One area in particular contains a long, narrow path, ending in a large circular clearing, similar in layout to the entrances of legendary Pokémon habitats in other games. This has led some fans to speculate that one or more of these missing areas could have been intended as homes for additional legendary Pokémon, perhaps ones that were cut from the final game entirely. Another fascinating piece of evidence lies in the game's fly map data. In the finished game, the fly map allows players to quickly travel between cities, towns, and key landmarks they have visited. However, in the game's code, there are extra fly map coordinates assigned to locations that do not appear on the actual map. This strongly suggests that there were originally plans for additional points of interest in Kalos. These points might have been hidden islands, new battle facilities, or even entrances to special dungeons. One popular fan theory ties these unused coordinates to the mysterious locked train station in Lumiose City discussed earlier. The theory suggests that the station could have been the main gateway to some of these missing post-game areas, serving as a fast travel point to faraway locations. It is possible that the developers planned for Kalos to expand after the credits in a way similar to the Sevii Islands from Pokémon Fire Red and Leaf Green, with players boarding a train to explore a separate set of maps. However, if such a plan existed, it never reached the final version of the game. There is also evidence pointing toward a more competitive-focused post-game facility being planned. In the files for Pokémon X and Y, there are unused trainer AI profiles that seem to be set up for battle scenarios not found anywhere in the released game. These AI profiles have unique teams and strategies, including mega evolutions that are not seen among any trainers in the final product. The way these AI files are organized mirrors the structure used for special battle facilities like the Battle Tower or Battle Subway in past games, suggesting that Kalos may have been slated to get a brand new facility of its own. Some fans have dubbed this the Battle Train theory, imagining a post-game battle hub that combined the aesthetics of the train station with high-level competitive play. Why these areas and features were cut remains uncertain, but most fans believe it came down to the sheer workload of building a Pokémon game in full 3 dimensions for the first time. Developing high-quality assets for entirely new locations would have been a massive undertaking, especially on a tight schedule. There is also the possibility that Game Freak intended to save some of these locations for the rumored Pokémon Z, which, as we know, never saw the light of day. In the end, the Kalos region's post-game remains one of the most debated topics among fans. On one hand, the available content is enjoyable, with the Friend Safari offering unique Pokémon and the Looker Bureau side quest providing a small but memorable storyline. On the other hand, the unused zones, missing fly map points, and cut trainer data all point to a richer post-game experience that could have kept players exploring for many more hours. Instead, these areas exist only as fragments of code and a tantalizing what-if scenario in the minds of players. For many, this knowledge changes the way they view Kalos. The region is beautiful and full of charm, but it also feels like a puzzle with missing pieces. Somewhere in the development process, those pieces were left on the cutting room floor, and we are left to wonder what adventures we might have had if Game Freak had been able to finish the vision they started. Lumiose City is easily one of the most ambitious locations ever created in a Pokémon game. Serving as the central hub of the Kalos region, it sprawls out in a massive circular layout with the Prism Tower at its heart, radiating avenues in every direction. The city was designed to feel alive, with cafes, boutiques, hotels, and back alleys that gave the impression of a bustling metropolis. But hidden beneath this sense of liveliness is a surprising amount of unused or unfinished content, particularly in the form of inaccessible building interiors that appear to have been planned but never completed. Even during casual play, many fans notice that Lumiose is full of buildings that cannot be entered. While some are clearly decorative, others stand out because they are fully modeled, complete with doors, signage, and even window displays, yet they remain forever locked. Upon closer inspection, the game's data reveals that some of these buildings are not just static props, they have partial interior data hidden in the files. This data includes room layouts, placeholder textures, and even the scripts for basic NPC dialogue. One of the most notable examples is a large restaurant-like building on North Boulevard. Players can see tables and chairs through its glass windows, but the doors remain inaccessible. In the game's files, this location is listed with an internal name that translates roughly to Fine Dining 2, suggesting it may have been intended as a second high-end restaurant, similar to those where players can battle trainers while ordering meals. This raises the possibility that there was once a larger restaurant network planned for Lumiose, perhaps offering different battle formats or special rewards. Another intriguing locked building can be found near the city's Hibernal Avenue. This structure is styled similarly to the hotels seen in other parts of the city, and its file name hints at it being Hotel 2. However, no such second hotel exists in the final version. Fans speculate that the unused hotel might have been tied to a side quest or served as an alternate location for post-game visitors, possibly even hosting event-specific NPCs. There are also remnants of what appear to be early versions of the city's boutiques. Pokémon X and Y's customization system, which allowed players to change clothing and hairstyles for the first time in the series, was a highly celebrated feature. In the game's data, there are files referencing additional boutique interiors that do not appear in the final product. These boutique layouts have empty display racks and cashier counters, suggesting that they were either placeholders or unfinished designs for clothing shops that were later removed. It is possible that Game Freak intended for more clothing stores to be spread across Lumiose, potentially offering different regional styles within the same city. Perhaps the most famous of Lumiose's unused interiors is the so-called Haunted Room. This small, dimly lit room contains only a single chair and a mirror with no interactive features. It is buried deep in the game's files and cannot be accessed without modification. While it might have simply been a test environment for lighting and camera work, its eerie atmosphere and complete lack of explanation have fueled countless fan theories. Some believe it may have been part of an expanded ghost-related side quest tied to the infamous Lumiose Ghost Girl, an NPC who appears under mysterious circumstances in the final game. Speaking of the Ghost Girl, her appearance has been one of the most discussed mysteries in Pokémon history. In the released version of X and Y, she appears when the player takes an elevator to the second floor of a specific building on North Boulevard. She floats into view, says, "No, you are not the one," and then vanishes without a trace. There is no quest, no explanation, and no follow-up anywhere else in the game. Many players have speculated that she was meant to have a much larger role, possibly connected to the unused haunted room or other cut interiors in Lumiose. The city's unused interiors also give us a glimpse into the sheer scale of ambition Game Freak had for Lumiose. Building such a massive, detailed environment in full 3 dimensions was no small task, and it is clear that the developers may have had to make difficult choices about which areas could realistically be finished in time for release. The existence of partially complete interiors suggests that many of these cuts happened late in development, when there was not enough time to polish and test them for public use. Over time, fans have restored some of these unused interiors through ROM modifications, allowing players to explore what might have been. While these restored versions are not always complete, often lacking textures, NPCs, or scripted events, they offer a tantalizing peek behind the curtain at a Kalos city that could have been even more alive and interactive than the one we know. In the end, the unfinished interiors of Lumiose City are a reminder that even the most vibrant and detailed game worlds are the result of compromise. For every location we get to enter and explore, there may be others left just out of reach, hidden behind locked doors that exist only as silent witnesses to the development process. In Lumiose, those locked doors stand as quiet mysteries, inviting curious trainers to wonder about the stories that might have unfolded inside. During your journey through Pokémon X and Y, there is a point where you must investigate a section of the Kalos power plant. Located in the Badlands of Route 13, this industrial facility is where Team Flare makes one of its major appearances, attempting to disrupt the region's energy supply. The part of the plant you can explore in the final game is relatively small, a single hallway with a few side rooms, some trainers, and the main control area. But hidden in the game's files, and hinted at by the layout of the overworld, there is strong evidence that the Kalos power plant was once intended to be much larger possibly even a full dungeon-like area with multiple sections to explore. When players approach the power plant from Route 13, they can see multiple identical entrances along the building's exterior. In the released game, only one of these entrances is functional, leading to the small interior where the story event unfolds. The other doors remain locked for the entire game, and interacting with them simply displays a message saying the door is shut. This struck many players as odd. Why would the developers design such a massive, detailed building with so many doors, only to use a single one? Data miners digging into the game's code found unused map entries that appear to be additional rooms for the power plant. These maps are partially complete, featuring placeholder textures, basic wall layouts, and object placement that matches the industrial style of the plant's existing interior. Some even contain coded scripts for trainer encounters, suggesting they were intended to host battles against Team Flare members. What makes this even more interesting is that some of these unused rooms are labeled with specific function names, things like Generator Room 2 and Storage Bay 4. These labels imply that the power plant might have been designed as a series of interconnected rooms, each with its own theme or gameplay purpose. It is easy to imagine a larger quest where the player had to navigate multiple sections of the plant, restoring power to different parts of Kalos, or chasing Team Flare deeper into the facility. There is also unused dialogue in the game's text files that references restricted sections of the power plant and multiple keycards needed for access. In the final game, the player receives a single keycard that opens the one accessible entrance, but these unused lines suggest that the original design might have included a more complex keycard system, requiring the player to collect multiple keys to access different wings of the facility. One popular fan theory is that the expanded power plant could have been tied to a larger post-game quest, possibly involving legendary Pokémon. The Kalos region has several legendary creatures with elemental connections, and a massive power facility could have served as a fitting location for an encounter with an electric-type legendary such as Zapdos, Thundurus, or a new Kalos-specific Pokémon. While no direct evidence of a legendary battle was found in the power plant's unused data, the sheer size and complexity of the planned layout hints at something more than just a mid-game Team Flare mission. Some players have also speculated that the power plant expansion might have been linked to the mysterious locked doors on Route 13 itself. The barren, windswept desert area that leads to the power plant is filled with unopenable gates and unused structures, many of which appear to serve no purpose in the final game. These could have been intended as entrances to side areas, storage yards, or other industrial facilities connected to the main plant. As with many of Kalos's unused features, the most likely reason for the power plant's downsizing comes down to development time and resource limitations. Designing and testing a multi-room facility with complex key item requirements would have been a significant undertaking, and given the already ambitious nature of Pokémon X and Y's transition to 3 dimensions, it is not hard to imagine that this section was scaled back to ensure the game shipped on time. Interestingly, later Pokémon titles have included more elaborate facilities that resemble what the power plant expansion might have been. The Mauville power plant in Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, as well as the expanded Ultra Beasts facilities in Pokémon Sun and Moon, offer examples of multi-room industrial areas that allow for deeper exploration. It is tempting to think that ideas from the scrapped Kalos power plant were recycled into these later games. For now, the extra rooms of the Kalos power plant remain sealed away in the game's files, inaccessible without modification. They exist as another example of a grander vision for Kalos, one where its landmarks were not just scenic backdrops, but fully explorable locations rich with challenges, secrets, and lore. The locked doors along the plant's walls, forever shut to the player, are a subtle reminder that behind every accessible room in a Pokémon game, there may be others we never get to see. In Pokémon X and Y, the Tower of Mastery in Lumiose City is one of the most visually striking landmarks in the Kalos region. Standing tall against the ocean horizon, this ancient tower is steeped in history and serves as the symbolic heart of Mega Evolution. It is here that players first meet Karina, the Lumiose City gym leader, and receive their very own Mega Ring. The tower's grand exterior, intricate stonework, and sweeping seaside views give it an almost legendary presence. But behind this majestic setting lies an intriguing mystery. Evidence suggests that the Tower of Mastery was originally designed to be larger and more explorable, with multiple rooms and floors that never appear in the final game. When players visit the tower in the released version of Pokémon X and Y, they can only explore the central chamber on the ground floor and a single upstairs room where key story events take place. The rest of the building is inaccessible, despite the fact that its design clearly suggests a multi-floor structure. The spiral staircases, visible balconies, and tower height all imply more interior space than the player is allowed to see. Data miners examining the game's files discovered unused map data associated with the Tower of Mastery. These unused maps are labeled as separate floors, such as Tower Second Floor and Tower Basement, and contain basic layouts that fit the architectural style of the tower's existing rooms. While these areas are unfinished, lacking detailed textures, furniture, and NPC placement, their presence strongly indicates that Game Freak originally intended the tower to be a more expansive location. Some of these unused maps feature large open spaces that could have been used for battles, ceremonial events, or cutscenes. Others include smaller chambers that may have been intended as living quarters, storage areas, or even archives for ancient documents related to Mega Evolution. This last idea is supported by unused text strings in the game's data that mention scrolls of mastery and hidden records of the Mega Stones, phrases that are never seen in the final game. It is possible these were meant to appear as flavor text when examining objects in the cut rooms. One particularly interesting discovery is the presence of unused NPC dialogue linked to the Tower of Mastery. This dialogue includes lines from characters identified in the files as Elder 1 and Elder 2, neither of whom appear in the released game. Their lines reference training in the upper chambers and guarding the relics of the first Mega Evolution. These hints suggest that the expanded tower may have once hosted additional story beats or optional lore for players to uncover. Fans have speculated that these missing floors might have been intended for a trial-like sequence, similar to the Battle Pyramid or the Dragon's Den from earlier games, where players would need to complete tasks or defeat trainers to earn the right to wield Mega Evolution. This would have fit perfectly with the tower's theme as a place of discipline and mastery. However, in the final game, the process of receiving the Mega Ring is relatively straightforward, with no extended challenge beyond a single battle with Karina. There is also the matter of the tower's basement. The unused tower basement map features a darker, more enclosed layout than the bright upper rooms, leading some fans to imagine it as a vault for rare megastones, or even a hidden chamber where a legendary Pokémon could be found. While no legendary encounter data is tied directly to the tower, the idea of an ancient guardian dwelling beneath the birthplace of Mega Evolution is a concept that resonates strongly with the Pokémon series' love for blending history and myth. Why these extra rooms were cut is uncertain, but as with many of Kalos's unused features, time and technical limitations were likely factors. Building fully explorable, multi-level environments in 3 dimensions was still relatively new territory for Game Freak at the time, and every additional floor meant more assets to create, more collision maps to test, and more camera angles to optimize. It is also possible that the developers decided to streamline the story for pacing reasons, removing extended exploration to keep the narrative moving toward the confrontation with Team Flare. Despite their absence, the idea of a larger Tower of Mastery has endured in fan projects and discussions. ROM modification communities have even attempted to restore some of the unused maps, filling them with custom NPCs, battles, and lore entries to bring the imagined full version of the tower to life. These fan-made interpretations often include training halls, relic displays, and grand ceremonial chambers, the kind of features players felt the official tower deserved. In the end, the Tower of Mastery remains a place of both inspiration and mystery. It is a monument to one of Pokémon X and Y's most important innovations, yet it also stands as a symbol of unrealized potential. Behind its locked doors and unfinished floors lies a version of Kalos's history that we will likely never fully see, a reminder that in game development, even the grandest structures can be cut down before reaching their intended height. The Kalos region is full of beautiful and atmospheric locations, but one of the most serene is the small riverside town of Kuraway. Known for its cascading waterfalls, quaint bridge crossings, and peaceful atmosphere, Kuraway Town offers a calm stop in the player's journey between Lumiose City and Snowbell City. But aside from its scenic beauty, Kuraway is home to one of the most intriguing mysteries in Pokémon X and Y, the unused and seemingly purposeless train station that sits quietly at the edge of town. In the final game, the Kuraway train station is a fully modeled building located just west of the main bridge. Its exterior features an arrival platform, a ticket booth, and benches for waiting passengers, all rendered with as much detail as the other functional buildings in the game. Players can walk right up to the station doors, but they cannot enter. The doors remain permanently locked, and there is no explanation given anywhere in the game for why the station is there or what purpose it might serve. From the moment players first discovered it, the Kuraway train station sparked speculation. Why would Game Freak include such a detailed structure if it had no function? Was it purely for decoration, or was it a leftover piece of a larger plan? Data miners soon found hints that suggested the latter might be true. Within the game's files are unused map entries labeled with variations of Kuraway Station Interior and Station Waiting Area. These maps are not fully built, but they contain basic floor plans consistent with other indoor locations, including space for NPC placement and scripted interactions. The station mystery deepens when you consider that Kuraway Town is one of only 2 towns in Kalos with a visible train station, the other being the locked station in Lumiose City. This has led many fans to believe that the 2 stations were meant to be connected in some way. A common theory is that a functioning railway was originally planned, allowing players to travel between Lumiose and Kuriway and perhaps other destinations via train. This would have been a natural fit for Kalos, which is heavily inspired by France, a country famous for its train travel. Unused text in the game's files lends further support to this idea. Among the unused dialogue, strings are lines from NPCs discussing train schedules, connecting lines, and ticket purchases. None of these phrases appear anywhere in the finished game, and their presence suggests that players may have been able to board trains and travel between multiple locations. It is possible that the train travel system was cut for time, or perhaps because it overlapped too much with the existing fly mechanic, which already allows for fast travel between towns. Another popular fan theory is that the Kuriway train station might have been tied to post-game content. In many Pokémon games, transportation hubs, whether they be harbors, airports, or train stations, serve as gateways to new areas unlocked after the main story. For example, in Pokémon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the magnet train connects Kanto and Johto after the player completes certain requirements. If Pokémon X and Y had followed this tradition, the Kuriway station could have led to a small expansion area, a battle facility, or even another region entirely. Some fans have even suggested that the train station could have been part of the rumored Pokémon Z, functioning as a story hub for new content centered around Zygarde or other legendary Pokémon. This idea is supported by the fact that Kuriway Town is located near the entrance to Victory Road, making it a logical place to situate a late-game or post-game travel option. What makes the Kuriway station particularly intriguing is how complete it looks, even without an interior. The attention to detail in its exterior design, from the weathered wood textures to the realistic ticket booth window, implies that it was not just thrown together as a background prop. Game Freak is known for reusing and repurposing assets in different games, but the Kuriway station remains unique to X and Y, suggesting that it was created for a specific purpose that was ultimately scrapped. To this day, the Kuriway train station remains one of the most enduring mysteries in the Kalos region. It stands as a silent reminder of a version of the game that might have offered more ways to traverse the region and perhaps more locations to discover. Its locked doors are an invitation to speculate, to imagine stepping inside, buying a ticket, and watching the waterfalls recede into the distance as the train carries you to a place that exists only in the game's hidden data. One of the most unique and striking parts of Pokémon X and Y's story is the incorporation of the ancient Kalos War, a devastating conflict that took place 3,000 years before the events of the game. This war is central to the backstory of AZ, the mysterious giant who wanders the region, and the ultimate weapon that once brought destruction to both humans and Pokémon. While the game does a good job of introducing this lore in key cutscenes, there is strong evidence that much more about the war was planned, but ultimately cut from the final release, including an entire location that would have expanded the history of this tragic chapter in Kalos' past. During the player's journey, hints of the Kalos War appear in scattered dialogue, murals, and historical texts found throughout the region. Geosenge Town is perhaps the most important location tied to this history, with the massive stones outside the town hiding the ultimate weapon underground. But data mining has revealed that another area, sometimes referred to in the game's files as the Ancient Tower, was once in development and appears to have been connected to the war's storyline. This unused location features a tall, narrow map layout that resembles a tower, complete with multiple floor identifiers and object placement markers. The interior structure has open central spaces on each floor, similar to towers seen in earlier Pokémon games, like the Bell Tower in Johto or the Celestial Tower in Unova. The file names for this location include references to War Memorial and Ancient Chamber, strongly suggesting it was intended as a historical monument to the events of 3,000 years ago. Unused text associated with the location paints an even clearer picture. Among these strings are lines describing statues of warriors, remnants of armor, and engraved records of the fallen. One particularly haunting line refers to a broken spear that once belonged to a friend, which many fans interpret as a nod to AZ's personal backstory. These details suggest that the ancient tower may have been a place where players could learn more about individual characters and events from the war, possibly even through NPCs acting as historians or descendants of those who fought. Interestingly, there is also evidence in the files of battle triggers tied to this unused tower. These are labeled with terms like Guardian 1 and Guardian 2, which could indicate that the location was meant to host special battles against trainers who protect the tower's relics. These guardians might have used teams themed around ancient weaponry or historical Pokémon, such as Honedge, Aegislash, or even fossil Pokémon revived for the challenge. Some fans have speculated that the ancient tower could have been intended as a post-game area, unlocked only after defeating the champion. Its connection to the war could have tied into a deeper exploration of AZ's role and the lingering effects of the ultimate weapon on the region. This would have given players a chance to experience more lore-heavy content, similar to the Sutopolis Cave of Origin sequence in Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but with a historical rather than apocalyptic tone. The tower's removal may have been due to time constraints or a shift in narrative focus. Pokémon X and Y already contained more cinematic cutscenes than any previous mainline game, and it is possible that the developers decided to streamline the story to maintain pacing. The ancient tower, while rich in atmosphere and lore, might have been deemed non-essential to the core gameplay loop, especially if it was located far from the main routes players were already traveling. Still, the idea of a dedicated location for Kalos War lore resonates strongly with fans. The war is one of the darkest and most mature story elements in the Pokémon series, and its limited screen time in the final game has left many players wanting more. The ancient tower, with its memorial-like design and historical artifacts, could have offered a powerful and emotional expansion to this already compelling backstory. In fan-made recreations, the tower is often imagined as a solemn, windswept place, with banners bearing the crest of ancient Kalos and the sound of distant drums echoing through its halls. Players in these interpretations can climb floor by floor, reading inscriptions and battling guardians until they reach the top, where a panoramic view of the region and a final memorial plaque await. It is a vision of what might have been a chance to stand in a place where the weight of 3,000 years of history could truly be felt. Today, the ancient tower exists only in fragments of code and the imagination of fans. But its presence in the game's files serves as another reminder of the depth and ambition behind Pokémon X and Y's world building, and of the stories left untold in the final journey through Kalos. Pokémon X and Y introduced several legendary Pokémon through the main storyline and post-game events, including the majestic Xerneas, or Yveltal, depending on the version, the mysterious Zygarde, and the mythical Diancie through a limited time distribution. However, unlike earlier generations, the sixth generation was light on elaborate in-game quests for these legendary Pokémon. As it turns out, data mining reveals that there were originally plans for additional legendary encounters in Kalos, some of which appear to have been fully conceptualized before being cut. The most intriguing evidence comes from unused text files that reference legendary Pokémon not present anywhere in the final version of the game. These include the names of Hoopa and Volcanion, both of which were officially revealed years later, but have data embedded in X and Y's code. At launch, neither Pokémon was accessible through normal gameplay, and their events were never formally activated within the Kalos titles. The presence of dialogue tied to these Pokémon suggests that Game Freak originally planned for in-game quests rather than simple distribution events. Some of this unused dialogue hints at specific locations. For example, one text entry refers to a tremor in the mountains beyond Route 19, an area in the game that leads to Snowbell City, but has no such event in the final release. Another line mentions steam rising from the hidden spring, which many fans believe could have been related to Volcanion, a water and fire-type Pokémon, whose lore ties it to steam vents and geothermal activity. Volcanion's eventual official lore from later games aligns perfectly with this unused text, suggesting the idea was in place well before it was ever made public. Similarly, Hoopa's unused references tie it to a ring of light appearing at the old castle, which is peculiar given that Kalos does not feature a traditional castle in its explorable areas. This has led to speculation that either an additional location was planned for Hoopa's event, or that its quest was tied to the Parfum Palace area, which in its final form serves mostly as a visual spectacle rather than a quest hub. The unused legendary content does not stop there. Internal data shows unused overworld sprites for what appear to be legendary encounter scenes, including an animation of the ground shaking and an object glowing with a soft pulsing light. These could have been tied to scripted sequences for finding these Pokémon in the wild. In the final game, none of these animations are used. Why were these events cut? One theory is that Game Freak was experimenting with the idea of delivering post-launch, downloadable content, DLC, for the main series, something they had never done before. The unused legendary events may have been placeholders for quests that could be unlocked in the future, but when plans for DLC never materialized, the events were abandoned. Another possibility is that these Pokémon and their quests were moved to later games to give those releases exclusive appeal, as Hoopa and Volcanion were eventually distributed through events tied to Pokémon Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, and later titles. The loss of these legendary quests leaves a noticeable gap in Kalos's post-game experience. Previous generations, like the Johto games with their roaming beasts or the Sinnoh games with Heatran and Regigigas, gave players elaborate multi-step quests to track down rare Pokémon. Kalos, despite its rich lore and diverse landscapes, offered fewer such opportunities. If the cut content had been included, players might have traveled deep into hidden mountain springs to find Volcanion, unlocked a mysterious portal to summon Hoopa, or uncovered a sealed chamber to encounter an unrevealed mythical Pokémon. In the fan community, these unused events have been revived in various ways. ROM modification projects have restored the legendary quests using the leftover text and animations, while fanfiction and artwork have reimagined them in great detail. These creations often weave the events into Kalos's existing lore, tying Volcanion's hidden spring to the region's geothermal plants, or placing Hoopa's portal in a lost section of Parfum Palace. In the end, the missing legendary event quests stand as one of the most tantalizing what could have been elements of Pokémon X and Y. Their presence in the game's code proves that at one point, Kalos' story was intended to be deeper and more interactive, giving players a reason to continue exploring long after the credits rolled. Instead, these quests remain locked away, their clues scattered like pieces of a puzzle that fans have been trying to solve for over a decade. The story of Pokémon X and Y's deleted and unused content is, in many ways, the story of game development itself. Every game begins with grand ideas, concepts for locations, quests, characters, and mechanics that would make the world feel fuller, richer, and more alive. But as deadlines loom, hardware limitations surface, and priorities shift, some of those ideas must be left behind. In Kalos, these abandoned concepts are not hidden entirely. They linger in the locked doors of Lumiose City, the silent platforms of Curryway Town's train station, and the ghostly data of legendary Pokémon that never arrived. For players, these remnants are both frustrating and fascinating. They are a reminder that even in the polished, finished games we play, there are always shadows of earlier versions, ghosts of ideas that nearly made it to the surface. And for a region as beloved as Kalos, those ghosts invite us to dream of what our journey could have been. Perhaps one day, Game Freak will revisit the Kalos region, bringing some of these lost ideas to life at last. Until then, we can only imagine stepping onto that train, unlocking that hidden room, or climbing that ancient tower, knowing that in the world of Pokémon, every locked door has a story,